wreck any living thing trying to go through. Jack by the G-gram, a Mac, a Wildstyle, never Coldhard.
Make the man vote. You play me too close, no joke.
The game shouldn't be so hard, man, when you already got talents. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you got the talent to do it, and you can make music and write songs and everything yourself, man, it really shouldn't be as hard for you to make a big stand up in this industry, man. But it's a lot of clauses, man, and a lot of doors that jump in front of you and stop your path before you get there. And you gotta be willing to almost give your entire life, 150% of your life, into becoming a musical artist, man, because I know for myself, I didn't felt like I done went crazy about it. I know my guys done went crazy about it, you know what I'm saying? But it's not a give up situation. If you got a lot of love for the music, it's gonna keep you in it.
Crucial Conflict, West Side, Chicago, active since 1993, featuring Never, Coldhard, Wildstyle, and Kilo. Creativity and innovation, two words usually used to describe today's feature, and for better or worse, those are pretty accurate. Crucial Conflict is heralded as being the first at a lot of things in hip-hop for Chicago, but most recognizable for their attempt at an unorthodox Wild West Southern style and sound that got them interest within the industry because for the most part, no one else were brave enough to try it. In the early 90s, Chicago had no real identifiable sound, not within hip-hop at least. Sure, they had house music, Twista, Common Sense, and a few more, but even then, how distinct are those sounds? Enough to differentiate Chicago and have the future follow suit? Not quite. Twista was more known for the speed in which he raps, to which he entered the Guinness books for being the fastest English-speaking rapper able to pronounce 598 syllables in 55 seconds. An achievement and a skill, but not quite a sound Chicago could all get behind. Mainly because how many artists, one, are interested, and two, able to follow in Twista's footsteps. And Common, to me, has more of an East Coast style, with a few words here and there that might tip off where he's from, but in sound, there's a reason for his heavy De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest affiliations. Crucial were doing things much different, and for a minute, it worked. They took their Wild West and Southern influences and created the '96 hit single Hey, their ode to their favorite pastime, and showcased their version of the chopper-style rap flow that originated sometime around the late 70s and early 80s, credited to people like Kool Mo Dee and the Treacherous Tree. Later, Twista and Bone Thugs-n-Harmony would take the sound to a more polished, mainstream level, and of course, in the mid-90s, Crucial Conflict decided to add to it with a southern flavor in sound and appearance. Many compared the two groups, Bone and Crucial, which led to Bone releasing the track You Ain't Bone, allegedly to stop artists like Do or Die and Crucial Conflict from biting their style. Unlike the career Bone was able to have though, Crucial Conflict weren't so lucky. Hey, in hindsight, would be the only hit song of their career that led to a gold album just a few months later. But quickly thereafter, the group ran into inevitable problems in hindsight, ones that made them a less memorable piece of hip-hop. Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music. Let's get it, man. This video is sponsored by Loops for Producers, the #1 site to get sounds for your production. Simply click the genre and product that catches your eye. On the product page, listen to the demos and choose the sound option you want to purchase. After purchase, you will receive the digital download to the email you provided. Unzip the file and drag and drop the sounds into your DAW. Let the creative juices flow. Loops for Producers, the #1 site for sounds. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Crucial Conflict was a rap group in the 90s from the west side of Chicago that's been around since '93-'94. It was then original members Wildstyle and Kilo met former members Lil Gino and Lil T at a K-Town party for local rappers to get together and freestyle. Because the new members were too young, producer Wildstyle and Kilo decided to keep looking and eventually ran into Coldhard and Never. They released a 7-track EP called Crucial Times in '93. The group got the name Crucial Conflict from a local friend to reflect the turbulent situations of survival in Chicago. While on a road trip from Chicago to LA, they traveled through the Death Valley Mountains and different parts of the South and felt a spiritual connection so strong they decided to incorporate it into not just their music, but style. Coming from a place that had no real hip-hop identity at the time, it seemed like a great idea. If nothing, it created talk about the group, although not always favorable. Having a Midwest group look and sound like Southerners wasn't easy to sell consistently, but it was different. Stunt number 1, making sense long term. In music, what has always worked for artists is their stake and claim to an original idea. However bad the idea turns out to be isn't always taken into consideration, more than hey, let's ride this out for as long as possible to hopefully turn a big enough profit. As Crucial Conflict formed and began to build chemistry through their EP and constant studio sessions, they soon figured they needed an identity. Since there was no identity in hip-hop for Chicago as yet, they decided to use their real-life experiences and settled on an Old West vibe, updated with the chopper style flow and southern twang, even calling their style rodeo, and creating a dance known as the Giddy Up. It was innovative and never done before, but it just wasn't cool after a short while and didn't have potential to grow on the masses. Even Chicago rappers decided against following in these footsteps as it was interesting but confusing at the same time. Plus, not everyone is traveling through mountains called Death Valley high off the hay before strolling through the South to pick up slang and an identity. Once an artist doesn't have influence locally, he loses home-based support, and that's what happened to Crucial Conflict. They were applauded for being the first to do hip-hop like they did, but the thing about being first is, it doesn't matter if no one else follows your lead. You're just a guy on an island committed to doing something different, simply for the sake of being different. Not like Chicago hasn't had country influences in the past. The Great Migration from the early 1900s to the 1970s saw many African Americans from the South settle in Chicago, but kept some of those same roots, bringing blues, jazz, soul, and R&B along with it. It made sense for Crucial to dress and sound Southern, but not long-term. It wasn't selling out fashion boutiques, in magazines documented as the next best thing, and it wasn't highly championed in hip-hop, not even locally. Until, without it being said, it made no sense. Stunt number 2, other options. Another major issue with Crucial Conflict is they had major competition with the chopper style flow that they took on, and those artists were doing it a lot better. Artists like Twista, Tech 9, and of course Bone Thugs, who really polished that rap style into the perfect fixture in the mainstream. That flow, along with unique vocal tones from each member in the group, not to mention Bone was and is arguably the best harmonizers the game has ever seen, placed Crucial Conflict quite a distance behind them in popularity. They were too raw and too hard for where the genre was going and headed to very soon. Sure, in the 90s it was all about hard lyrics and screw faces to intimidate other rappers, but the 2000s was coming and hip-hop was moving toward a more marketable place. There wasn't much to market about the hard sound and penitentiary look of Crucial Conflict, and because they couldn't make the transition to utilizing harmony and melodies, or at least be the best option for what they were doing, it made them easy to pass up and eventually forget. After their debut studio album and hit song Hey in '96 went gold, Crucial Conflict never reached that success again, and much of it was to do with there being other, much more fitting options. Stunt number 3, one-hit wonders. The thing about Crucial that would have made everything I said not make sense is if they had made more hits after their song Hey in '96. In 1998, they released their second album, but this time it didn't have a goal-worthy single on there that could crush the album like before. Make matters worse, the album did have at least one Bone Thugs diss record, stemming from Bone having issues with Twista about who originated the chopper style flow. The diss drew a line in the sand that was unfortunate for Crucial because instead of working together and using Bone to elevate them onto a higher platform, making fans have to choose instead of enjoy both. Fans love Bone, and obviously the narrative they were pushing that everyone using that flow is a biter made it even more easy to miss Crucial. What could have saved that from happening? More hit songs. Unfortunately, there was none left in the chamber, and Crucial disbanded in '98 and wouldn't reunite until a decade later when not many cared. All in all, Crucial Conflict will always be remembered as being the first and attempting to somehow be different. Hey is considered a classic hip-hop song for many, but they didn't have much past that, and it shortened their longevity. Legends in the game, but for these reasons, their growth was stunted. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.